Pierre, floor is yours.
Yes, my question is for Chief Jules, of whom I am a great admirer. I'll read a wonderful quote that he published in a book recently. Let me be a free man, free to travel, free to stop, free to work, free to trade where I choose, free to choose my own teachers, free to follow the religion of my fathers, free to talk, free to think, and act for myself. Unfortunately, Chief Jules, you and your people have been deprived of these basic freedoms for far too long in a system that imposes paternalistic and colonial powers from Ottawa, powers that remain to this day. And you've just given an example whereby the federal government in Ottawa is taking $700 million of taxes from your from your communities across the country, not just reserves, and then requiring that you come to Ottawa and ask for permission to have some of it back. Can you comment on this nonsensical idea that politicians and bureaucrats in Ottawa believe they can take your money away and then tell you how and under what conditions you can have it back?
I think this goes to the heart of not only talking about UNDRIP, but actually the whole colonial era under which Canada still operates. And you look no further to systemic racism than the Indian Act. It's one of the earliest pieces of Canadian legislation. It governs the majority of communities right across the country. And in 1927, because here in British Columbia, we were struggling to have a fair and just settlement of the land question, the federal and provincial government took away our ability to raise money through taxes, TAKSIS. And that's the fundamental way in which all governments in this country provide services. And so when you look at the fiscal relationship that we've got, we're beggars in our own land. And what we want to be able to do is share in the bounty of this land so that we can be major contributors, not only to deal with, all of the issues that have been outlined, but COVID has exposed the fact that we're the most dependent people in this land. That's led to mental health care issues.
Right.
That's led to the shortage of housing, health care, all of those aspects. And the only way to change that is through the work of your committee. The finance committee has got to give recommendations to the federal government that we've got to fix this imbalance, that First Nations shouldn't be funded on the basis of programs, but should be part of the fiscal makeup and therefore getting the tax revenues that are collected on our lands and within our traditional territories.
Right, and the bounty you seek to have is your own. This is not a gift from the government in Ottawa that you're seeking. You're seeking the power to benefit from the bounty that is on your land and produced by your people. And yet, all of these years later, we've learned so little that we require your people to come here to Ottawa to ask for what is already yours, what was always yours before the arrival of Europeans. You had another amazing quote. You said you were talking about the achievements of Indigenous people in the Americas prior to European arrival. You said, do you think that this was all achieved through the divine intervention from the gods, or was it because we somehow evolved into a natural socialist system that lasted 1,000 years? Both those ideas are nonsense, you write. And you also explain how the first peoples of this continent had marvelous systems of free trade and commerce that allowed pipestone to be discovered by later archaeologists in places it never existed, because clearly your people were engaged in trade well before trade was introduced to the continent by Europeans. So do you think part of the challenge here is to empower First Peoples to have the kinds of economic freedom that will allow them to prosper without the paternalizing powers of the government in Ottawa?
And that'll have to be the last question, Pierre. Mr. Jules?
Well, it's obvious that, when people say that, well, I'll pass legislation recognizing First Nations people as a result of implementing UNDRIP. UNDRIP is just one piece of legislation. We have to look at a myriad of legislative changes that have to take place. We have to be a fundamental partner in the fiscal makeup of Canada, not only from an economic standpoint, but a political one. We have to, and what COVID has exposed again is the dearth of jurisdiction within our communities. We're so dependent on the federal and provincial governments for the provision of services that we have to be beggars. And what we need is not a program, but we need the jurisdiction to be able to look after ourselves. And the more we're able to look after ourselves, the less liability the federal and provincial governments will have over this notion of looking after us. We're the best caretakers of ourselves.
Okay, thank you both for that
point
round.
Of order.
Yes, Ms. Jensen, is it?
It's probably not quite a point of order, but what is the name of that book that Chief Jules wrote? I'd like to put that on my Christmas list.
Yes, it's called Beyond the Indian Act, and Chief Jules wrote the foreword to the book, and it is absolutely a must-read for everybody. Beyond the Indian Act, Restoring Aboriginal Property Rights.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, it's really not a point of order, but it was a good point of information, Tamara.
Then we'll, Chairman, now you know what to get Ms. Jensen for Christmas.
That's
Still
true.
time.
Okay.